The stars looked peaceful from Earth. No one knew that beyond those twinkling lights an empire of aliens watched and waited. The Valkyrian Empire had conquered 17 solar systems. They ruled over 32 different alien species. Now, they wanted Earth too. Their spaceships appeared suddenly one morning, huge metal monsters that blocked the sun in some places. People all over Earth looked up and felt afraid. News channels showed the same images everywhere, massive ships hanging in the sky like dark clouds. A message came to every television, radio, and phone on the planet. The alien voice sounded cold and mechanical through the translators. People of Earth, we are the Valkyrian Empire. Your planet is now under our protection. You have 30 Earth days to surrender control. If you resist, we will destroy your civilization. This is not a negotiation. In an underground room beneath Geneva, Switzerland, 20 humans sat around a large table. These were Earth's leaders, military commanders, scientists, and government officials. They had gathered to decide how to respond to the alien threat. Admiral Frank Porter stood at the head of the table. His gray hair showed his age, but his eyes remained sharp and clear. Holographic screens floated in the air, showing the alien ships positioned near Mars. They've parked their main fleet just beyond Mars orbit, he said. Our satellites count over 300 vessels. 40 of them are larger than anything we've ever built. General Lisa Hayes nodded. Her dark skin looked pale under the harsh lights of the bunker. Their battle cruisers are 10 times stronger than ours. Their weapons would cut through our defenses like paper. What about a diplomatic approach? Asked Dr. Ben Miller, the civilian scientist. Maybe we can negotiate better terms. Admiral Porter shook his head. We tried. They won't respond to any messages except to repeat their demand, surrender or die. The room fell quiet. The situation seemed hopeless. Earth had spaceships and weapons, but nothing that could match the alien technology. In the corner of the room, someone cleared their throat. Heads turned to look at a small woman in dirty overalls. She had been invited as a technical consultant. Her brown hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and she had grease stains on her hands. Cassie Wyatt worked as the chief engineer on Earth's best spaceship, the USS Horizon. People called her the Wizard because she could fix almost anything. I've been studying the scans of their ships, Cassie said. She walked to the table and pressed a button on her tablet. A 3D model of an alien vessel appeared in the air. There's something interesting about their design. Admiral Porter frowned. Engineer Wyatt, we appreciate your expertise, but this is a military crisis. We need battle strategies, not technical reviews. Cassie didn't seem bothered by his tone. She pointed to a specific part of the alien ship model. See this section here? It's their cooling system for the main engines. Every ship in their fleet uses the same design. She twisted a dial on her tablet and the image zoomed in. It's actually quite elegant, very efficient, but there's a flaw. The room grew quiet again, but for a different reason. Now everyone leaned forward, suddenly interested. The primary cooling junction connects directly to their power core, Cassie explained. If someone could access this point and reverse the flow regulators, it would cause a system-wide failure. Their weapons would shut down. Their shields would collapse. General Hayes looked skeptical. And how would we get someone to this junction? Their ships must have thousands of soldiers. Cassie smiled and pulled a large wrench from her tool belt. The metal tool looked well used but carefully maintained. Their interior security relies on automated systems, not soldiers. I've studied their sensor technology. They scan for weapons and explosives, not tools. She twirled the wrench between her fingers with surprising skill. Sometimes the simplest solution works best. One person with the right knowledge and the right tool could do more damage than an entire army. Dr. Miller looked confused. Are you suggesting we send in a mechanic instead of soldiers? I'm suggesting you send me, Cassie said. The room erupted in voices. Absurd. Impossible. One person against an empire? Admiral Porter raised his hand and the room fell silent. He studied Cassie's face carefully. You understand what you're proposing? If you're caught, there will be no rescue mission. We don't have the capability, Cassie nodded. Her eyes showed no fear, only determination. I understand the risks, but I also understand their technology. I can do this. Porter turned to his tactical officer. Could we get her there? Is there any ship fast enough to slip past their defenses? The officer thought for a moment. The Mosquito prototype. It's small, designed for one pilot. The new cloaking system might hide it from their scanners long enough. Porter looked back at Cassie. And if you reach their flagship, you believe you can disable their entire fleet with a wrench? Cassie held up her wrench. The overhead lights gleamed on its metal surface. This isn't just any wrench, Admiral. I made it myself from a special alloy that can interface with both our technology and what we know of alien systems. It's a tool, a key, and if necessary, a weapon. The room remained doubtful, but Cassie continued. Their empire spans galaxies, Admiral. They've conquered dozens of worlds. They expect us to respond with our biggest guns and our best soldiers. They've prepared for that. They haven't prepared for one angry mechanic with a wrench. A slow smile spread across Porter's face. It's crazy enough that it just might work. He stood straighter and looked around the room. What's our alternative? Fight a war we can't win? Surrender our planet without trying everything possible? One by one, the leaders nodded their agreement. Some looked resigned, others hopeful. All of them knew this might be Earth's only chance. Admiral Porter looked at Cassie. You have 24 hours to prepare. The future of humanity depends on you, Engineer Wyatt, and your wrench. Cassie tucked her wrench back into her belt. I won't let you down, sir. I've been fixing impossible problems my whole life. This is just a bigger challenge than usual. As the meeting ended, Cassie walked alone through the long underground hallway. She knew the odds were against her. One person against an empire of conquerors. But she also knew something the aliens didn't. Sometimes the most dangerous human wasn't a soldier with a gun, but a mechanic with a problem to solve and the right tool for the job. Cassie sat alone in the tiny spacecraft called Mosquito. The ship was barely bigger than a car and designed for speed, not comfort. Her knees almost touched the control panel. Around her, the vastness of space stretched in all directions. Ahead of her, she could see the massive alien ships. They looked like giant metal insects, their hulls covered in strange patterns. The largest ship sat in the center of the fleet. This was the inevitable conquest, the flagship of the Valkyrian Empire. This was her target. Just breathe, Cassie told herself as she checked her equipment one last time. She wore a simple gray jumpsuit with many pockets. Each pocket held a different tool. Around her waist hung a tool belt with her special wrench secured to it. The wrench felt heavy against her hip, a comfort in this dangerous mission. The Mosquito had one advantage, its experimental cloaking system. This technology bent light around the ship, making it nearly invisible. Nearly, but not completely. If the aliens looked very carefully or used their best scanners, they might find her. Approaching the outer defense grid, Cassie said into her recorder. Admiral Porter had asked her to document everything in case she didn't return. Cloaking system at maximum power. She guided the small ship carefully between the patrol vessels. The aliens had smaller ships moving in patterns around their fleet. These ships carried scanning equipment that could detect Earth vessels. Cassie held her breath each time one passed nearby. A warning light flashed on her control panel. One of the patrol ships had changed course and now moved in her direction. They've detected something, Cassie whispered. She didn't dare use the engines to move faster. The heat from the engines would make her even easier to find. Instead, she let the ship drift, making only tiny adjustments with the smallest thrusters. The patrol ship came closer. Through the window, Cassie could see its scanning beam sweep back and forth. The beam passed over her ship once, twice. The Mosquito's computer flashed another warning. The beam would hit her ship directly on the next pass. Cassie reached for the control panel. She had one desperate idea. She turned off all systems except life support. The Mosquito went completely dark. No power, no heat signature. Nothing for the scanners to detect except a small piece of metal floating in space. The patrol ship's beam passed over her again. Cassie held her breath. Then, after what felt like hours, the alien vessel moved away, continuing its patrol route. Cassie exhaled slowly and restored power to her ship. That was too close, she muttered as she adjusted her course. Now she aimed directly for the massive flagship. The inevitable conquest grew larger in her window. Up close, the ship seemed impossibly huge. It stretched for miles, a city in space. Cassie had studied the design of this ship for days before her mission. According to their intelligence, somewhere on the outer hull was Maintenance Hatch 7. This entrance would be less guarded than others. She found it after 30 minutes of careful searching. The hatch looked like a small door on the side of a mountain. Cassie guided the Mosquito alongside the giant ship and extended a docking tube. With a soft hiss, the tube connected to the alien hatch. Docking complete, she reported into her recorder. Preparing to board the Valkyrian flagship, Cassie gathered her tools and checked her oxygen supply. She carried no weapons. Weapons would trigger the ship's security systems. Instead, she relied on her knowledge and her tools, especially her wrench. Just another repair job, she told herself. Break in, fix the universe, get home for dinner. The airlock cycled open. Cassie stepped from her ship into the alien vessel. The air felt strangely thick but breathable. The gravity felt slightly stronger than Earth's, making her movements feel heavy. The corridor she entered was empty, its walls a strange bluish metal that seemed to glow faintly. Cassie pulled out a small device from her pocket. On its screen appeared a map of the ship, created from scans and intelligence reports. According to the map, she needed to travel down this corridor, through 3 levels of the ship, and into the central engineering section. There, she would find the cooling system that controlled the entire fleet. She moved quietly through the empty corridor. The ship hummed with energy around her. Strange sounds echoed from distant parts of the vessel, mechanical noises and occasionally voices speaking in the alien language. At the end of the corridor, Cassie found her first obstacle. A sealed door blocked her path. Next to the door was a control panel with symbols she didn't recognize. "Okay, let's see what we're dealing with," she whispered. From her tool belt, she pulled a small scanner. The device analyzed the door's locking mechanism. The results appeared on her screen in English. "Standard security lock, 3-phase circuit," she read. "Not too complicated." Cassie took her wrench from her belt. The wrench didn't look special, but she had modified it herself. Inside its handle were advanced electronics. The head of the wrench could change shape slightly to fit different systems, both human and alien. She placed the wrench against the control panel and turned it slowly. The internal computers in the wrench analyzed the alien technology and sent the right signals. With a soft click, the door slid open. Beyond the door stretched a much larger corridor. This one had other aliens walking through it. Cassie ducked back quickly before anyone saw her. These weren't soldiers, but seemed to be crew members. They stood nearly 7 feet tall with 4 arms and scaled skin that reminded Cassie of lizards. They wore fitted uniforms with different colored markings. "Need another way," Cassie muttered. She checked her map again and found a maintenance tunnel that ran parallel to the main corridor. The entrance should be nearby. She found it behind, a small panel in the wall. The tunnel was tight, barely big enough for her to crawl through. For the aliens with their larger bodies, these spaces would be almost impossible to use. This gave Cassie an advantage. She crawled through the dark tunnel, guided by the soft glow of her map device. The metal felt cold against her hands and knees. Strange pipes and wires ran alongside her. Some hummed with energy, others carried liquids that glowed different colors. After 20 minutes of crawling, Cassie reached another panel. According to her map, this should open into a less-used section of the ship, closer to the engineering area. She listened carefully for any sounds beyond the panel. Hearing nothing, she gently pushed it open and peeked out. This new area looked different. The walls were covered with pipes and control panels. The air felt warmer here, and the hum of machinery was louder. Cassie had reached the outer edge of the engineering section. The heart of the ship was near, and with it, her target. Cassie slipped from the maintenance tunnel into the corridor. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her hands remained steady. She had come this far without being discovered. Now came the most dangerous part of her mission. Somewhere ahead was the central cooling system, and probably many Valkyrian engineers. One human against an empire of conquerors. One mechanic with a wrench against advanced alien technology. Cassie touched her wrench for reassurance. "Time to get to work," she whispered. Cassie pressed herself against the wall as two Valkyrian engineers walked past. They were discussing something in their strange language, their forearms moving as they talked. They didn't notice the small human hiding in the shadows. When they were gone, Cassie consulted her map again. The central engineering room should be just ahead. That's where she would find the main cooling system for the entire fleet. She moved carefully down the corridor, staying close to the wall. The ship felt alive around her, humming with power. Pipes ran along the ceiling carrying glowing liquids. Control panels blinked with alien symbols. Cassie wished she had more time to study it all. Despite the danger, she couldn't help but admire the alien technology. "Beautiful engineering," she whispered to herself. "Too bad I have to wreck it." At the end of the corridor stood a large doorway. Unlike the others, this one had two Valkyrian guards standing beside it. They wore armor that made them look even larger than the engineers. Each guard held a weapon that glowed with energy. Cassie pulled back before they saw her. This had to be the entrance to the central engineering room. But how could she get past the guards? She looked around and noticed a small maintenance panel near the floor. According to her map, this might lead to another tunnel that went into the engineering room. It was worth trying. Cassie opened the panel and squeezed into the narrow space. This tunnel was even tighter than the last one. She had to pull herself along on her stomach, pushing her tool belt ahead of her. The space was hot and dark, filled with the sound of machinery. After crawling for several minutes, she reached another panel. She listened carefully before pushing it open slightly. Through the small gap, she could see a massive room filled with complex machinery. This was the central engineering room of the Valkyrian flagship. The room was huge, with a ceiling that rose several stories high. In the center stood a column of pulsing blue energy, the main reactor that powered the ship. Around it moved dozens of Valkyrian engineers, checking instruments and adjusting controls. Cassie opened the panel wider and slipped into the room. She hid behind a large piece of equipment, watching the aliens work. She needed to find the cooling system without being spotted. From her hiding place, she studied the room. The engineers seemed to be focused on a section near the reactor. One Valkyrian stood out from the others. This alien wore a different uniform with special markings. He had 6 arms instead of 4, and all of them moved with incredible precision as he worked on a complex panel. "That must be Chief Engineer Kraxator," Cassie whispered. Earth intelligence had identified him as the genius behind much of the Valkyrian technology. He directed the other engineers, who jumped to follow his orders immediately. Cassie watched as Kraxator worked. His movements were quick but careful, his many hands adjusting different controls simultaneously. Despite being the enemy, Cassie couldn't help but respect his skill. In another life, we might have been colleagues, she thought. Suddenly, an alarm sounded in a distant part of the ship. Several engineers looked up, including Kraxator. He barked orders to his team, then hurried from the room to check on the alarm problem. Cassie smiled. The alarm was part of her plan. Before entering the ship, she had programmed her own ship, the Mosquito, to create a small power surge in its docking connection. Nothing dangerous, but enough to trigger the ship's sensors. With Kraxator gone, Cassie had her chance. She slipped from her hiding place and moved quickly toward the reactor. The remaining engineers were busy at their stations and didn't notice the small human moving in the shadows of their massive machinery. Near the reactor, Cassie found what she was looking for: the main cooling junction. It controlled the temperature of not just this ship's reactor, but the entire fleet's weapon systems. The ships were linked through a shared power regulation system, a clever design that allowed the Empire to control all vessels efficiently. But it also created a vulnerability. Cassie pulled out her scanner and analyzed the cooling system. It was even more advanced than she had expected. Glowing tubes carried a strange liquid that absorbed heat from the reactor. The liquid then passed through a series of chambers where the heat was extracted and vented into space. Cross-connected phase inverters, quantum stabilizers. Impressive, Cassie murmured as she studied the system. She identified the critical junction, where she could make her adjustments. A few careful changes here would create a chain reaction throughout the fleet. She took out her wrench and prepared to begin work. This would require precision. One wrong move could cause the reactor to overload, which would destroy the ship and her along with it. That wasn't her plan. She wanted to disable the fleet, not destroy it. Just as she was about to make her first adjustment, a deep voice spoke behind her. Human engineer. An interesting choice of saboteur. Cassie froze. Slowly, she turned around. Standing behind her was a Valkyrian warrior twice her size. He wore armor more elaborate than the guards outside, with symbols that must indicate high rank. His face looked reptilian but intelligent, with yellow eyes that studied her carefully. In his hands he held a weapon that hummed with energy. Earth intelligence had shown her images of this Valkyrian. Commander Sam Tucker, the Empire's most decorated soldier. He had led the conquest of 17 planets. Now he stood between Cassie and her mission. "I'm just the mechanic," Cassie replied, casually gripping her wrench. "Here to fix a problem." Tucker's head tilted slightly as he studied her. "Your species continues to surprise me. We expected your military elites, your special forces. Instead, they send maintenance personnel." "Sometimes a wrench is all you need," Cassie said, subtly adjusting her stance. "You have made it farther than expected," Tucker admitted. "Our security detected no weapons, no explosives, just a small life form with tools." He gestured at her wrench with his weapon. Cassie stayed calm, though her heart raced in her chest. Her mind worked quickly, assessing the situation. The commander blocked her escape route. The other engineers hadn't noticed them yet, but they would soon. "Your cooling system is elegant but flawed," Cassie said, trying to keep him talking. "The primary junction relies too heavily on the secondary backups, which creates a vulnerability. During power surges." The Valkyrian commander's face changed slightly, his mandibles clicking in what might have been surprise or amusement. "You came to offer engineering advice to the Empire?" "More of a practical demonstration," Cassie said. She knew she had only one chance. The commander was larger, stronger, and had a weapon. But Cassie had something he didn't expect. Knowledge of exactly how everything around them worked, and years of experience solving problems in tight spots. Tucker raised his weapon. "Your bravery honors your species. It will be noted in the archives after Earth's conquest." Cassie's grip tightened on her wrench. "The thing about conquest, Commander, and it's not over until it's over." Commander Tucker aimed his weapon at Cassie. The moment stretched between them. In the background, the massive reactor hummed with power. The other engineers remained focused on their work, not yet noticing the human intruder. "Your mission ends. Here, human," Tucker said. Cassie didn't respond with words. Instead, she moved. Years of crawling through tight engine spaces and wrestling with stubborn machinery had made Cassie stronger and faster than she looked. Before Tucker could fire his weapon, she threw a small tool from her belt toward a nearby control panel. The tool hit a series of buttons, causing alarms to blare throughout the room. The other engineers jumped in surprise, looking around for the source of the alarm. In that moment of confusion, Cassie ducked and rolled to the side, avoiding Tucker's first shot. The energy blast hit the wall behind her, leaving a scorched mark. Cassie didn't try to run. Instead, she moved closer to the machinery. This was her world. Pipes, wires, control systems. She knew how things worked, how they connected, how they could fail. Tucker followed, his large form less agile among the tightly packed equipment. He fired again, but Cassie had already moved, sliding beneath a large pipe. The commander growled in frustration. "Stop this foolishness," he called. "You cannot escape." Cassie reached up and twisted a valve on the pipe above her. Hot steam burst out, creating a cloud between her and Tucker. She used the cover to move to another position, circling back toward the cooling junction. The other engineers were now aware of the intruder. They shouted in their language, some moving to help Tucker, others securing the critical systems. Cassie knew she had little time. She needed to reach the cooling junction, but Tucker stood in her way. She studied his armor as he searched for her through the steam. Like all Valkyrian technology, it was elegant but had weak points. The joints where the armor pieces connected would be less protected. Tucker spotted her and raised his weapon again. Cassie grabbed a heavy tool from a nearby workbench and threw it directly at his right arm. The tool struck perfectly at the elbow joint. Tucker grunted in pain, his shot going wide. "Our warriors train from birth," Tucker said, his voice angry now. "How can you hope to match that?" "I fix broken things for a living," Cassie replied, ducking behind a large machine. "That means understanding exactly how they break." She studied her surroundings, looking for an advantage. Above Tucker's head ran a series of coolant tubes. With the right pressure applied at the right point, Cassie threw her wrench with perfect aim. It hit a connection point in the tubes. Cold liquid sprayed down onto Tucker, covering his armor. The liquid wasn't dangerous, but it was extremely cold. The temperature change caused Tucker's armor to contract slightly, restricting his movement. While he struggled with his stiffened armor, Cassie dashed toward the cooling junction. She had only seconds before the other engineers reached her. Her fingers flew over the controls, making precise adjustments. This wasn't sabotage, it was recalibration. She wasn't destroying the system, just changing how it worked. Behind her, Tucker had freed himself from the coolant spray. He charged toward her, moving more carefully now. He had seen enough to respect her skills. "Whatever you're doing, it won't matter," he said. "Our fleet will still destroy your world." Cassie continued working, not looking up. "You're wrong about that." Tucker reached her just as she made the final adjustment. He grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the controls. Cassie didn't resist. She had finished what she came to do. Tucker's grip was strong, his armored hand easily encircling her arm. "What did you do?" he demanded, looking at the controls. The displays showed no obvious changes, no alarms. "I told you," Cassie said calmly. "I fixed a problem." Around them, the other engineers had gathered, some pointing weapons at Cassie. "Chief," Engineer Crackstor returned, rushing into the room. He pushed through the crowd and examined the cooling junction. After a moment, Crackstor looked up in shock. He spoke rapidly to Tucker in their language. Tucker's eyes widened. He looked at Cassie with new understanding and... was that respect? "You've recalibrated our entire fleet's cooling system," Tucker said. "Our weapons will overload if fired." Cassie nodded. "For exactly 72 hours. After that, the system will reset itself. No permanent damage." Craxator continued examining the changes, his 6 arms moving quickly over the controls. He seemed more fascinated than angry, speaking rapidly. To Tucker, "Our chief engineer says he cannot undo your changes without shutting down the entire fleet." Tucker translated. "He also says, your work is impressive." The other engineers murmured among themselves, looking at the small human with a mixture of anger and curiosity. "You could have destroyed our ships," Tucker said. "Why didn't you?" "That's not why I came," Cassie replied. "I'm not a soldier, I'm an engineer. I solve problems, I don't create them." Tucker's grip on her arm relaxed slightly. "What was your purpose here?" "To send a message," Cassie said. "Earth won't surrender, but we don't want war either." She looked around at the alien technology, then back at Tucker. "Your empire has conquered many worlds. Your ships are powerful, but you've never faced humans before." Tucker considered her words. "One human with a wrench has disabled our entire fleet. This is unexpected." "That's the message," Cassie said. "We're unpredictable, creative. We solve problems in ways you won't expect. If you attack Earth, you won't be fighting our weapons. You'll be fighting our minds." The engineering room fell silent. Even the alien engineers seemed to understand the significance of the moment. One small human had done what no other species had managed: stopped the Valkyrian fleet without firing a shot. Tucker released Cassie's arm. He seemed to be making a difficult decision. Finally, he spoke. "Our mission was to conquer Earth with minimal damage. Your actions have complicated this mission." Cassie picked up her wrench from where it had fallen. "Then maybe it's time for a new mission." Tucker looked at her with those alien yellow eyes. For the first time, Cassie saw uncertainty. There. Perhaps, he said slowly, we should reconsider our approach to your species. The room remained quiet as Commander Tucker and Chief Engineer Craxtor discussed something in their language. The other engineers watched Cassie with a mixture of fear and respect. No one had ever infiltrated a Valkyrian flagship before, let alone disabled their weapons. Finally, Tucker turned back to Cassie. The Empire does not negotiate with conquered species. We're not conquered, Cassie reminded him. And won't be. Tucker's face showed conflict. You have disabled our weapons, but our empire spans galaxies. More ships will come. And we'll be ready, Cassie said. But maybe there's another way, one that doesn't involve conquest or war. Craxtor spoke again, gesturing at Cassie's wrench and then at the cooling system she had modified. Tucker listened carefully. Our chief engineer suggests something unprecedented, Tucker said slowly. He wishes to understand how you identified the flaw in our system. Knowledge exchange instead of conquest. Cassie smiled. Engineers speak the same language everywhere, I guess, even across species. Tucker didn't smile, but his posture relaxed slightly. I will return you to your vessel. You will carry our response to Earth's leaders. Cassie raised an eyebrow. Just like that, you're letting me go? You have disabled our weapons. Keeping you prisoner serves no purpose, Tucker said practically. And your message must be delivered. He gestured for her to follow him. The other engineers moved aside, creating a path through the room. Some still looked angry, but others seemed curious about this small human who had outsmarted their best systems. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Cassie noticed that Tucker was treating her not as a prisoner, but almost as an equal. Alien crew members stared as they passed. Your people expected us to attack immediately, Tucker said as they walked, to use our weapons and superior numbers. That's what conquering empires usually do, Cassie replied. Tucker made a sound that might have been a laugh. The Valkyrian Empire has existed for 10,000 years because we adapt. We learn from each species we encounter. They reached the docking area, where Cassie's small ship, the Mosquito, remained attached to the flagship. It looked tiny compared to the massive alien vessel. Before you leave, Tucker said, I must know. How did one human know exactly where to strike at our technology? Cassie patted her wrench. We studied your ships for weeks. Every system has weaknesses. It's just a matter of finding them. Your cooling design is brilliant, but too standardized. One flaw affects everything, Tucker nodded. And you chose to disable rather than destroy. I'm a mechanic, not a destroyer, Cassie said. I fix things. Perhaps, Tucker said thoughtfully. There is something to fix here as well. He produced a small device and handed it to Cassie. Give this to your leaders. It contains our terms. Cassie took the device and climbed into her ship. As the airlock closed, she looked back at Commander Tucker. See you around, Commander, she said with a small smile. Tucker didn't smile back, but he inclined his head slightly in what might have been respect. The journey back to Earth was quieter than the trip. Out! No patrol ships challenged Cassie's small vessel. The Valkyrian fleet remained in position, but now Cassie knew their weapons wouldn't fire. Earth had 72 hours of safety, time to prepare a response to whatever terms the aliens offered. Wendiu. Cassie's ship landed at the Geneva spaceport. A crowd waited for her. Admiral Porter stood at the front, his face showing disbelief and hope. You made it back, he said as Cassie climbed out of the Mosquito. Cassie grinned, holding up her wrench. Told you I would. She was taken directly to the underground bunker, where Earth's leaders waited anxiously. The same people who had doubted her plan now looked at her with amazement. On the screens around the room, images showed the Valkyrian fleet still in orbit, but making no aggressive moves. Report, Engineer Wyatt, Admiral Porter said formally. Cassie described everything, her infiltration of the ship, the modification of the cooling system, and her conversation with Commander Tucker. Then she handed over the alien device. Their terms, she explained. The device projected a holographic message when activated. Commander Tucker's image appeared in the center of the room. The alien soldier looked stern but less threatening than before. "People of Earth," Tucker's message began. "Your representative has demonstrated that your species possesses unexpected qualities. The Valkyrian Empire respects strength and ingenuity. We offer an alternative to conquest." The room was silent as everyone listened. "We propose an exchange. Knowledge for knowledge. Technology for technology. The Empire will not attack Earth if you agree to share your unique perspectives with us. In return, we will share advancements that could benefit your world." The message continued, outlining a proposal for peaceful contact between the two species, not as conquerors and conquered, but as potential allies. When the message ended, the room erupted in discussion. Some leaders were suspicious, others cautiously optimistic. Admiral Porter turned to Cassie. "You did this," he said quietly. "One mechanic with a wrench accomplished what our entire military couldn't." Cassie shrugged. "I just showed them we think differently, that conquering us would be more trouble than it's worth." 3 months later, a single Valkyrian ship entered Earth orbit. Unlike the warships before, this was a diplomatic vessel. It requested permission to land, a courtesy the Valkyrians had never shown to any species before. Cassie stood on the landing pad as the alien ship touched down. Admiral Porter stood beside her. "They're here because of you," he said. "The Empire's never backed down before. They've never sought peaceful relations with anyone." Cassie shrugged, her trusty wrench hanging from her belt as always. "Most problems don't need a hammer. Sometimes all you need is the right tool and the knowledge of where to apply it." The ship's doors opened. Commander Tucker emerged, now wearing ceremonial armor rather than battle gear. Behind him came Chief Engineer Craxus Tor and several other Valkyrians. Tucker approached Cassie and Admiral Porter. He looked at the wrench on Cassie's belt and made that sound again, the one that might have been a laugh. "The mechanic who changed. An Empire's path," he said. "Just doing my job," Cassie replied. "Fixing problems." Tucker extended one of his large hands in a gesture he must have learned from studying humans. "Perhaps we have much to learn from each other." Cassie shook his hand, her small human fingers barely wrapping around his alien ones. "I've been studying your quantum stabilizers. They really are brilliant. I have some ideas I'd like to discuss with your engineers." Admiral Porter sighed. "Just try not to start another interstellar incident." Cassie patted her wrench affectionately. "No promises." Around them, humans and Valkyrians regarded each other warily, but with growing curiosity. Two species from different worlds, brought together not by war but by the ingenuity of one human with a wrench. The universe, Cassie thought, was full of problems waiting to be fixed, and she was just getting started.